Hey gang, Mark LeBlanc welcoming you back to the Alley Cat Workshop. Last week I got a chance to stain and varnish the face frame of the leftmost cabinet, and this morning I spent some time getting it actually installed and glued onto the actual hutch. And you'll see there's a couple of clamps still on the left hand side because I still have a little bit of clamping to get done just to complete the glue up. So in this video what I want to show you is how I built this carcass, and I'm going to use the middle hutch to be able to do so. And everything that I'm going to be doing is going to be using this tool, the DowelMax, which I've absolutely fallen in love with. Alright, so let me start. I'm going to start with the leftmost style. Here it is. This is a piece of white oak, 4 inches wide, 4 feet long, and about 3/4 of an inch thick. Now this piece is supposed to mate with the rightmost style of this cabinet. So the first thing I'm going to do right now is drill the dowel holes for that mating piece. And one thing that you will see me do all the time is, instead of drilling all the dowels all at once, I'm going to take it one step at a time and do actually some testing as well, just to make sure that everything fits properly. Okay, now what DowelMax recommends is that before you do any drilling, you identify the surfaces that you are going to be referencing from. And those surfaces should be identified with a check mark. Now in this case, I want my piece to be flat with the rightmost style, so I'm going to put a check mark right here on the top, and flush with the top, so I'm going to put a check mark over here. And the last thing that they recommend you do is that you put an X on the surface, let me do that, on the surface where you're going to be drilling your holes. Why? Because the DowelMax itself has those check marks as reference points on the tool. So if I bring this in early, there's a check mark over here and over here, meaning that you can align the tool either this way or the other way. And there's also a check mark on the inside face of the tool itself. So let me get myself set up. I'll show you what I mean by using those check marks, and then we'll start drilling our holes. Alright, so for this first operation, I've got my check mark on this face and on this edge. So those are the two pieces, and I got my X right over here. My piece of white oak is in my vise on my bench, so it's nice and solid and ain't gonna move. Alright, so I have a check mark here, which I'm going to match with this edge, and the check mark on the inside is going to match with this face. So let me just put it here. Make sure that the tool is flush on this edge. Secure it to a piece. Make sure, yeah, that looks good. That's all you need to do in terms of setup with the tool itself. I've got the bit and I've adjusted the depth of cut so that it's going to go deep enough into the tool. Alright, I'm ready to drill. Now in this case there are 5 different holes for the dowels. I'm using holes number 1 and 5 throughout. Let me show you. Pretty easy. Alright, sorry, that was... Alright, I'm going to move this down. Now, the question is, how far down? And DowelMax, as part of the kit, gives you this this bar here that has, let me just show you that. It's got, basically this is the width of the dowel hole. But if I stick this in the bottom dowel, and just bring my tool right a bit against that bar, then I've adjusted the offset. Obviously this offset is the same one that was used when I did the other mating piece. So I just need to drill my holes, go down the line up until I get to the end. That's as easy as that. Alright, time to do a test. So just to recap, this is the face with the X, this is the face with the check mark, and this is the top with the check mark. I've put only a few dowels. I've put, what, 5 in this case, because I don't need all of them, and just to do this test. Let's go take a look. That, my friends, is picture perfect. It's flat on this face, it's completely flush on the top. Life is beautiful. And you saw that doing this particular joint took only a few minutes. Alright, let's jump to the next part. So for this second joint, what I'm looking to do is attach this stile to the front of the cabinet. And what I'm going to be focusing on is drilling some dowel holes along the face of this, the wall, the leftmost wall of the cabinet, and also doing some dowel holes on the face, on the back face of this stile. So what I've done is I've identified, I've put an X on this face, and I want the piece to be flush with the top, so I put a check mark here. And also flush with the side, so I put a check mark here. And if you recall, this side is where I put the dowel holes that will mate against the last cabinet. So I'm all set with this piece. Let's put this aside. For the leftmost wall, I want it to be flush with the side, so I put a check mark here. And I wanted it to be flush with the top, so I put a check mark there. And X is where, that's the face that I'm going to be drilling the holes. Now, there is a situation here that's going to be rather interesting, is that I cannot put my DowelMax completely at the top. The top of the cabinet is actually in the way. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to deal with that later, but for now this is perfectly fine. So what I need to do is I need to match check mark with check mark. Alright. Attach the DowelMax to the face frame and start drilling my holes. Now I'm going to need a bit of a step ladder here because I am tall, but it's a little bit uncomfortable. And I'll be using the exact same distance to go down the line up until I get to the very end. Alright, here goes. Whoops. Doesn't feel very stable. That's a little bit. Again, holes 1 and 5. Alright, for this next set of drilling or cuts, there's going to be a significant amount of setup, and I think it's worthwhile to show you what I'm talking about. So this is my style. If you recall, this is the piece that's going to mate, or this is the side that's going to mate with the leftmost cabinet. I want to drill dowel holes in the face here. Now if I put my DowelMax like this, obviously it ain't going to work. Now let me show you this. This is going to take just a few minutes. Okay, you see the DowelMax? You've got these two screws here on the side. I'm gonna just loosen up the brass bolts, and I'm going to, hopefully you guys are seeing this, I'm going to take everything apart, and I'm going to flip my DowelMax away. There are corresponding holes here. There's one, there's two, there you go. Now it's been configured so that I can put this against the face frame. That's as simple as that. Next thing I need to do is adjust the depth of my drill bit. Now, one thing I would like to do is actually get a second drill bit so I don't have to do these changes all the time. It doesn't take that long, but what I'm afraid of is I'll forget one day and I'll drill right through my pieces, which would be a disaster. All right, so I'm gonna loosen up. There's a couple of bolts. Oh, geez. There we go. A couple of bolts on the side. I'm going to move my DowelMax over the edge so that my drill bit, I can see how far it goes. Okay, that looks about right. And, oops, I'll do that again. That's too much. All right, I got my finger where I want it. So I'm going to twist this around so that the bolt actually is against one of the walls of the drill bit. All right, there we go. There we go. Drill bit all set. Okay, now, if you recall, there's an offset from the top here that when we did the drilling, and I need to account for that. So what I did is I did a couple of jigs. This is a plywood jig, and this is a white oak. Now in this case, the piece of wood on the top was plywood, so I'm going to use this jig. And I did two cuts. One is for a piece of oak, and one is for a piece of plywood. You'll see I'll be able to use these two at some point in time. Since I'm using oak, I'm going to use this guy. So all I'm going to do is place it on top and put it flush with the edge and align my DowelMax against it. And that is going to register the DowelMax. Do this properly here. That's going to register the DowelMax with the necessary offset that we have on top. That looks really good. Okay. Now that my setup is complete, time to start drilling holes. Here we go again. All right, it's done. Now, next thing I want to do is I want to attach the face to this board right here. This is going to be slipping over here as such. It's going to be flush with the edge here. And it's going to allow me to attach the hardware for the drawers. So I need to have this piece in place there, and I want it to be flush with this side. So what I've done to mark it is I've taken a pencil and I just drew a line underneath here, so at least it lets me know what the reference point is for that cut. Okay, so here's that line for that bottom, I guess that bottom brace. I've aligned the DowelMax with that line. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill holes 2 and 4, and then something is going to happen that's actually pretty neat. You'll see. All right, let's do it. All right, so I want to drill a couple of more holes. So I'm going to displace the DowelMax, and instead of using the distance, I'm going to use this peg here, which lets you reset right inside the second hole, and I'm going to drill again holes number 2 and number 4. Alright, so I've taken the board that will be used to hang the hardware for the drawer out of the carcass. I've reconfigured the DowelMax and put it flush against this side and flush against the face. So the check marks are here, and if you can imagine, it's on this face. So once again, holes number 2 and 4. Oh, and I've adjusted the depth of the drill bit. Alright. Move it down the line. Alright, it's in place. Again, holes 2 and 4. Now, before I put this board back in its place, I'm going to add a little spacer so that it will square up this whole device. And for that, in this case, pocket screws is actually a pretty good choice. Alright, again, time to test. Let me line it up here. Looks pretty good. Alright, this is good. This is good. Time to start working on the rightmost rail, which I will do off camera. Alright, well, I'll say that that's actually a pretty good day. A little bit of cleanup. I'll come back tomorrow. We'll work on the different rails and the middle style. It's going together pretty well. Well, good morning. Back in the shop. It's a nice and crispy day out there, so it's a good day to be here and doing a little bit of work. So I started this morning by cutting down the pieces for the rails. And the rails are installed, but it's actually a friction fit right now. That just goes to show you how tight these pieces are. There's a 4-inch rail on top and 2-inch rail here in the bottom shelf and a 2-inch rail at the bottom of the hutch. So I have a bunch of dowels to cut in this case. I have dowels to join because these are always 2 different pieces that are mated together. So I have dowels to create for each of the pieces. And I have dowel holes to plug for the joints between the stiles and the rails, and finally I have dowel holes to prepare for the including or getting these pieces into the face frame. So now that my DowelMax is actually dialed in to do the face of the rails, I'm going to focus on that and get everything done for every single one of these pieces. Alright, let's get started with the top. Now, in this case, let's do our planning. I want my pieces to be flush with the top, so I'm going to put a check mark here. And I also want this, let's plan this out. I want my pieces to be flush with this side as well. And X, this is the face that I'm going to be putting my my dowel holes in. Okay, so I've got this thing identified. It's a good thing. Let's go back to the bench and let's do our dowel holes. All right, so let's do this. I got a check mark on this face, check mark on both sides. That's the way the DowelMax is set up. My check mark, first one is over here, my second one is over there. So just putting the DowelMax over here, lining it up on the side. It's nice and flush. Just do it a little bit more. All right, and I'm going to start off with holes 3 and 5, and then I'm going to go down the line. And the reason I'm not using holes number 1 and 2 is that eventually there will be dowels in the side, and I don't want these other dowel holes to interfere. So I want to leave enough space for those guys. All right, let's move this along. Once again, and I'm using the same distance for every single one of these cuts. It's just, it's not worth doing any changes. Actually, I might have to here, because if I do the next one, it's going to be too much. All right, so let's change this a little bit. Takes 2 seconds. Okay, in this case, holes 1 and 5. And over here, let's do holes number 1 and 3. All right, I need to do the exact same steps for the other 5 pieces that constitute the rails. So I'll do that off camera. All right, so I've got all 6 pieces of the rails done to be able to mate with the face of the carcass of the hutch. And what I did is, for each of the pieces I identified, for example, this is the middle right piece, so it's going to go over here. And the other thing that I did is, for each one of the holes, I actually identified, this is the hole number 3 and 5, 1 and 5, so that if I get confused while I'm cutting the corresponding holes, then I can always refer back to this and say, oh yeah, it's true, that's the one that I used. All right, so here's a close-up of the DowelMax. And one thing I want to point out, see this face, right? It's got the check mark. So you would think that pretty much every single cut you're going to make, that's the face you're going to be referencing from. But so happens that from time to time, it references this face or even this face, and there's a pretty significant difference between those 3 faces. It makes the tool maybe a little bit prettier, but I wish that DowelMax had actually put these faces to be exactly the same on all the components, so that you wouldn't get confused or wouldn't introduce these errors. So it's happened to me before where I was actually referencing this face, and when I went to the corresponding piece, I was using this face, and it wasn't working very well. So just be careful with this. Just wanted to note it out to you guys before carrying on. Anyways, let's get back to work. good. Making good progress now. So I finished drilling the holes on the face and everything is in place, and it's a dry fit. Imagine that, only with dowels, no glue, and not a whole lot of dowels either. Everything is holding up already. So I'm at that point right now where it's time to start doing joints between, for example, the stiles and the rails, and even in the rails at the midway point I do need to make these joints. But I also cut this piece, which is going to go right here in the middle. Let me just set it up for you. And that is going to be the central stile that will hold the doors shut when it's time. So I do need to make these joints here as well, top and bottom. But, you know, pretty fascinating. You're seeing how this system works. All right, let's start. Everything is pretty straightforward. So for example, this joint, the reference point is going to be this line on top. Same thing over here. But there are two places where things get a little bit different, and it's right over here. So what I'm going to do is scribe a line in the back of this board, and that's going to indicate the reference point between this rail and the stile. I'll do the same thing on the other side. And now it's time to take everything apart and just drill those final pocket or those final dowel holes. But yeah, it's coming together. It's pretty cool. One piece that's going to be different from the rest is going to be the center stile. So I've got it set up in my vise. I'm going to drill one dowel, number one hole, on using the left edge, and then I'm going to reposition the DowelMax on the right edge and drill a hole on hole number one. So only two dowels on either end, and they're going to be as close to the edge as possible. And that's so that I won't interfere with the additional joints that are going on. Okay, we're getting close to the end. This is the middle left piece or rail, and I've got just a sacrificial piece just to give it some support. I'm going to put the DowelMax in a couple of seconds. Now, if you recall, there's going to be a center stile that's going to come up here, and I need to drill one dowel in the middle piece. So what I did is I marked a line 2 inches away from the edge, because my middle stile is actually 4 inches wide. So that's going to be my reference line, and this is the face, so that's where my check mark is. So I've got check mark is the line, check mark is this face. Come on. Let's line it up properly. And it's on hole number one. So I need to do that on both middle rails and both top rails. All right, so I got all my dowel holes cut. I'm back on the left hand frame or hutch. What I want to show you is that in order to hide the middle joint, what I did is I cut a quick chamfer on the rails so that it would kind of hide the fact that there's a joint there. It looks a lot better. So I've set up my router right over here. I've got a chamfering bit in there, and I'm going to pass the 6 pieces that produce the rails. I'll do that right now, and that will be the last thing I do today. Tomorrow I'm going to try to assemble this. That will be fun, and if everything works well, and it should, then I'll take everything apart, sand it, and start putting some finish. So I said I'd wait until tomorrow. Sorry, I just had to do it. And it turned out to be actually a lot simpler than I thought. So here's the process. I started by tacking on this left stile and left it a little bit askew, a little bit open, so that I could enter the, these rails. And what I found out is that I have to connect the rails together. So these two pieces, and those two pieces before I actually put the middle brace or the middle stile. And so I can start tacking things over onto the hutch slowly, leaving myself some play over here, and then finally I just put the right stile with all the connections, and there you go. I love this tool. Again, if you have ever considered or never considered DowelMax, take a look at it. It is absolutely amazing. So this took me 2 days to put together, and you saw the number of dowel joints that I made. It's significant. Yet this is really strong, very precise. The joints are good. Hope that you notice now the chamfer detail. It actually looks pretty good there. And yeah, in the end, quite simple to use. Hopefully this was useful for you. So I'm going to stop it here, and I will see you next time as I continue building the cabinets for my former regiment, Royal Canadian Hussars. Thanks for watching, folks, and see you soon.